Hello there, how are you? Well, here is a tale of the useful boy. Now, this story is also about friendship. And just being friends doesn't mean that you just share fun and secrets and these kind of things. Being friends means being there for someone, doing something out of the way for the other person when they need it, right? Without their need to ask for it, and being compassionate and kind and giving you support. And you're lucky if you're surrounded by such friends, class fellows, cousins, and friends. So here we get started with the story, and the story it starts with this girl who's working in a house, and it's in a little bit of old English, archaic English, so I'll explain it to you. It was bad enough being a girl and going out to work in service when I was young, but it was much worse for boys because but as they went in as usefuls in an ordinary household, they weren't trained for much, and when they got bigger and their appetites grew, they were paid off and someone else took their place. Usually they were taken on for charity. There was a boy like that in the place next door to my Miss Johnson. So Miss Johnson is her employer. The people who lived there were known as Scott Browning. Anyway, and they had a big house and a garden with an apple and pear orchard between us and them. All the houses were built on the slope of a hill, and us being above them, we could look over our garden wall right onto the orchard tree tops. These Scott Brownings also had a living-in girl like me. She was about my age, a squatty, dark little thing called Ethel. And then they had this boy, Mason, who hardly lived in the house. He bedded down in the moldy hay on top of the stable where there used to be a horse. So they were a set of unkindly people, don't you think so? When I first went to Miss Johnson's, I thought I was in heaven. She was such a nice old dear. She was always very kind. And mind you, could I be blamed? She looked older because she dressed like Charlie's aunties in blacks and dark browns and wore caps with lappets and mittens all day long. But she was sprightly. She tended a garden, and she also gave a real hand with the housework. She had been a governess once and had traveled overseas, so she had seen a lot. Miss Johnson gave me a little brooch made of tiny bits of colored stones called mosaic, and a painting called the Blue Grotto, which she had brought back from her travels. She wanted to give me some reading and writing and lessons too, but I dodged away from that. Please, I used to say, Mum, you'd be wasting your time, Mum. Now, Mum was for ma'am, because I'm naturally opaque. Now, I didn't know what opaque meant, but I had once heard a young gentleman telling a friend about something being opaque when he was muddle-headed. It was a slang word. So we see Miss Johnson is a very kindly person. Then we see, anyway, just to let you know how nice Miss Johnson was and give you an idea as to why I got so comfortable and at home at her place. At home, we had always been used to getting up early, so I would do that, pegging out the midweek wash at 6 o'clock. Then when I'd finish, I'd grab a crust of bread and butter and I'd chin up on one of our fruit trees and sit on a branch and look down atop of all those green pears and apples in the Scott Browning's orchard. Right. And then I came to speak to one of the boy, Mason, as I was sitting on the perch of a tree. I was shocked to see him there early in the morning. And I said, what are you doing here early in the morning? I've never seen you before. He didn't give me a sulky answer. He just went on staring and his eyes being all wet and swimmy with tears, as if he couldn't bear another nasty word from anyone in the world. So instead of berating him further, I leaned over our wall and looked down on him. I said, you'll get bellyache if you keep eating those green pears. Aren't you had breakfast? He shook his head. Then he tells me his name was Mason and about sleeping in the stable at that. And he didn't know anything more about himself except that his other name was Dick. I asked him about the other girl, Ethel. He says even the girl eats some of his bits, whichever is left over from the mistress's food. She gets hungry too. Now, I really felt, because I'd had that kind of an experience. I could see that Mason was as thin as a stick, and by his manner I could tell he was worried and frightened. His master and missus would know he had been complaining, and he was scared that they might send him away. Well, cheer up, mate. See, and I told him that I could get some food for him because my mistress didn't mind. So I was going to butter myself another hunk of a piece of bread with red jam. Instead, I told him, I'll give it to you if you like, so long as you promise not to tell a soul. So I spread the hunk of bread and the boy stood against the wall. And he took it into his hands, and that was the last I saw him. He was there again the next morning, and I did the same. I gave him scraps of ham, scraps of turkey, big dead bits, whatever I could lay my hands on, whichever was kind of given away. And he would grab that food like it was silver and gold, pelted off with them, and that's all I would see of him that day. And he would be there the next morning with Ethel now, and their eyes like starving sparrows. After I gave them scraps, I would get more of stale bread. Instead of giving it to the baker, I would give it to them. And then I wish you could see how those kids ate. Once I left the porridge over the fire and burned, and Miss Johnson said to throw it away. And Ethel and Mason got through the whole lot. The Scott Brownings were a fat old pair, him especially with one of them great big brown fronts. And on Sundays they had a job getting into church side by side. They so were nourished looking. One day I said to Mason, I'd want to upturn their dinners on their heads. Mason had a dry little laugh. She does things to them sometimes. He kind of pointed towards Ethel, spiders and beetles mixed up with a spoon and stirred into the hot pot. So they kind of fed in hatred in those kids for themselves. I bet you put her up to it, for I could see that Ethel was so beat and so squatty, she had never thought of such an outrageous thing. So I'll be back soon, kids.